Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Need, and today I am joined by a good friend of mine, mentee, coach, Laura Vinger. Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Paul, so excited. You cannot understand how excited I am to be here today. So happy to be on the pod with you.
Well, explain it to me. How excited are you?
How excited am I? Yeah, almost nervous. My palms are sweating. No, I'm just kidding. I'm very excited to be here today. I know that, number one, you are highly intelligent and you have a ton of experience behind you. You do a great podcast. I love the people that you have on the podcast. So I'm really excited to be able to be part of getting some good information, getting some good stuff out into the universe. So with you today. So I'm super excited.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you on. I'm actively seeking to interview as many coaches as I can because I feel like each one of us does something a little bit different, and each one of us has our own philosophy on how to accomplish the same tasks. The whole art of coaching being so important. I think a lot of cases people get tied to a book and it really limits their ability to help people.
Yeah.
And what I'm noticing is the people that are most successful in coaching, they understand the books, they understand the science, they understand the studies, but more than that, they understand people. And I think where I want to start our conversation is you have a deep experience in dealing with people and teaching. So what's your background? How did you get to where we are today?
Great question. And I have to agree with you 100% on what it is about the art of coaching. It's very similar to the art of teaching, right? In terms of even just public school education, which is where I come from, or I have come from. I started my life in not in education. I spent a lot of years doing a lot of things, meeting a lot of different people, working in bars, working in manufacturing. I mean, I kind of did it all in my 20s and I had a great time. The interesting part, though, was through it all, I got my first gym membership when I was 16 years old. My dad gifted me a gym membership. Yes, I started going to the gym when I was 16. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about anything. And I was at the gym.
I don't think many people at 16 know anything about anything in general, but
Right.
we'll start with that.
It became part of my soul. It became part of who I am. And got my first personal training certification when I was 18, started training people, started talking to people, started working with people on their nutrition when I was in my early 20s, all of that. But I wasn't doing it as a job. I wasn't thinking of it as a career. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then
it wasn't a career, really.
Hmm?
Back when you started, it wasn't really a career.
Oh, no.
People weren't like, you weren't getting the, 6-figure personal trainer or the, 6-figure online wasn't even a thing, right?
No, absolutely not. Which is funny because I remember meeting like my first real trainer that I kind of got to know a little bit. And he's this old school guy, really gruff. He's in this gym with all this dirty equipment stuff. And he was like, I just don't make a lot of money doing this, and it was pretty funny. But then I had some life experiences that occurred and went back to college. I had stopped going to college for about 6.5 years, didn't know what I wanted to do, went back to college. I became a teacher because what I knew is, and I remember I had this conversation or this thought process with myself sitting in Grant Park in Chicago after doing a 700-mile bike ride for 7 days to raise money for research. Yes.
Just the casual 700.
No big. And it was my second time doing it. I did it 3 times, right? And I remember sitting in Grant Park after going through all these fields of corn and the dust and the dirt and God, why am I doing this? It hurts so bad. And thinking to myself, what am I going to do with my life? And I realized I like to help people. I like to educate people. So of course, my brain didn't go, well, you should be. And I thought about being a life coach at some point, like a life coach. And back then a life coach was this woo-woo thing that people were like, you're an idiot. Don't do that.
Still is.
Yeah, right. There you go. And so I went into education. My dad was in education. I became an English teacher because I love reading things and learning things that way. Even when I was a teacher, I was still training people. ran cycling classes. I did all of those things. And it was just who I am. It's just who I am. And the structure of education was great to help me understand and learn to work with different people, because what public education is it's working with people. It's not teaching a subject. And so I really learned how to work with people. I did cognitive coaching. So I became a cognitive coach where I learned to ask the good questions, listen more than I talked, do all of those things. And that's really where I live, is learning to understand the person that I'm talking to and to open myself up and forget. It's interesting because when we coach someone, we really want them to reconnect with themselves. But as a coach, I have to disconnect from myself
100%. Yeah.
100%. And I have to become like just this huge sponge of listening to them and trying to become more of them so I can help them be better. And so really I come from an educational background, but it wasn't standard education. My classroom never looked like a normal classroom. I was always this person who I am, trying to really reach inside every single person individually and bring out the best in them.
I love, so the first thing that I wanted to pull out of that was you came to the realization that education was your path during a period of like pure exhaustion.
Yes.
And I like, that's funny, but it's also something that I think a lot about, because for me, training and competing and pushing my body has always been this vehicle for self-improvement. It's because there's no better clarity than when you're just absolutely physically exhausted. And I think a lot of people miss out on that feeling
Mhm.
and that clarity that you get from training. And it's cool that we now get to teach other people how to do that.
Mm.
The other piece was, you said I have to disconnect from who I am, and I have to learn how to become more of the person I'm in front of. I've always looked at it as, you start off a relationship as a coach athlete or coach client, and you are this like dusty mirror. And every conversation that you have with that person, you kind of wipe the dust off of yourself. And eventually you get to a point when you have all the information, you can see the big picture, that you perfectly mirror that other individual. So you are able to identify and help them work through any of those cognitive distortions, those limiting beliefs. And you're not necessarily doing anything special other than kind of peeling back the layers for that person.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a client this morning just about that. She has just started counseling with a therapist. Second meeting with the therapist, and it did not go well.
Oh,
And yep. And before we got on it was so funny because her and I have been working through some things that she's going through, because we don't just do nutrition, training, sleep, that kind of thing, right? We work on stress and what's going on in your life. This is coaching in real life time, right?
right.
And she said, before we got on our call this morning, she said, I sat down and I thought, what would Laura, I have to make I'm going to do my list. I'm going to do my journaling like I've talked to with Laura, because we're going to talk about all these things. And we got on our call and she said, I just work better with you. You're such a better psychologist. And I said to her, though, as we went through the conversation, I said, like, take a breath, think about that. I've known you for 2 years. I've had the opportunity every week to learn things about you and find out who you really are, and this person doesn't have that yet.
Hmm.
Right? So it's a really interesting place to be, because no, we're not psychologists, we're not therapists, but and I said to her, I said, some days I probably know you better than you do, just
Yep.
because I'm not standing in your way. I'm just here trying to help. So
Yeah, I think you bring up a really interesting point. It's something that I find myself saying very often. Is like, I'm not a therapist, but I do have a deep understanding of psychology because I've done my job to educate myself on the subject. And the reason being, I mean, to share my own experience here, I started my coaching journey or career as someone with very low empathy. Like, I didn't I didn't give a shit. If it was written on the piece of paper, you were going to break your arms and legs trying to do what was written on the piece of paper. Anything less was unacceptable to me. And over the years, like I was also working with high performance athlete populations, so it's a little you can get away with that. But as soon as you step out into the real world, and for me, it was working with disabled populations, both physical and cognitive, dealing with mental health issues, dealing with disabilities being off work, the challenges of identity that come along with that, and learning to just be there for somebody and hear them and hold space, learning to empathize, and then becoming this non-judgmental problem solving machine.
Mhm.
Because that's one thing that our clients lack is perspective. We have this really powerful ability as coaches to zoom out and zoom in and zoom out and zoom in. And because we personally don't have any attachment to outcomes, we can be so you like have so much utility to that person
Mhm.
because that provides a lot of clarity for them and they can come to the realization of what decision is best on their own.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
I totally agree. That non-judgment piece is so important too, because as an individual, and I do this, I'm sure you do this for yourself, in your own head. There's a lot of judgment there every day doing stuff, trying to figure things out, whatever, whatever. And it's no, no, Paul, not for you. Okay, just
oh,
me. I'll own
oh
it. Just me.
Laura. Oh Laura, there's been a
Just
lot
me
of
then.
therapy in my life aimed at removing that from my thought
It
process.
is,
That's
it is very
literally all I
difficult.
do in therapy.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And that is one of the things that I find interesting about like when onboarding a new client or when speaking to someone who may want to become a client or just talking to anybody who figures out or finds out that I'm a functional health coach is you can see it in their face. They're automatically like, "Oh, are you judging me for what I'm eating?" And I think that's one of the most challenging concepts as a coach to help someone new understand is that I'm not standing in judgment of anyone.
Mhm.
That's not it. That's not why I do what I do. In fact, that's exactly the opposite of why I do what I do. Because
Yeah.
I don't want you to judge yourself. I'm not going to judge you because all we're doing is trying to move you toward your goals to be healthier, to have a different physique, all of those things.
I actually was having this conversation with Meredith this morning because I just came back. I just trained, but I just came back from coaching her this morning. And that judgment piece, like, it's a very interesting conversation because I'm not judging. I understand what you're going through. I understand that maybe you don't have the emotional or cognitive tools to make the best decision for you in this moment. Maybe you have a lack of awareness around the emotional cues for you to actually take action. But there is something to be said for being a coach who has a personality or a presence where people want to impress you. And the conversation this morning was around, I get told all the time that I'm very intimidating. So I try to go out of my way to remove that from the way that I dress to the way that I speak with the cadence that I do, the words that I use. I pick them very carefully, but it still comes back to I'm intimidating. And what I think that is something that has actually served me really well because my clients want to impress me. So they make better decisions and eventually those decisions become habits.
Yes.
Is that something that you kind of find yourself playing with or toggling with? I find it really interesting to talk about these things with female coaches as well because it's completely different.
You know, if for me, I am a very humble human being. I don't take credit for the work. My clients do a ton of work. I guide them, I give them ideas, we work through things. I don't force them to do anything, obviously, but I agree with you that there has to be that piece of them that says, "I really want to do." Until they come to the point where they wanna do it for themselves, there
Nailed
has
it.
to be that outside, the outside influence, which I don't mind being. That's what I should be, and I appreciate that, and it does make my job easier if they do have that. I f So, yes, so I do toggle that quite a bit. It's like, "No, I need to see this," and I use it this way, like, "I need to see what you're doing so we can make modifications if we need to." So, show me what you're doing. I need to see what you're doing. Even if it's not great, let's see what you're doing. And then that kind of helps them to be like, okay, well, she'll see what I'm doing and I still want to do great. And it's really interesting when I have clients, and I've had multiple clients do this. I heard you in my head, Laura, when I was doing this.
Yeah.
And I just laugh. And part of me goes, that part of me, that little girl part of me that says, you shouldn't be that important to other people, which is one of my, things, says, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And I can't believe that happens. But the bigger part of me says, absolutely. I'm so glad I'm in your head now. That's great. Because if you don't have that, your own voice in your head telling you that, use me. I'm good for it. So I'm getting more comfortable with that piece of it. And I think that just takes time to get comfortable with that. But I agree with you. It's important because so many people, the voice in their head is negative and takes them in directions that they shouldn't be going. So we should be that. And most people, they always say, the 5 people that are closest to you reflect you.
Mm-hmm.
Most people look to people that they are better than, right? And
Yeah.
so what happens, right, is their path in life goes in a way that they don't necessarily want it to. And if they're coming to us as coaches, they probably need someone who's going to elevate them. And if that means that I'm here to elevate you in a way that you think I don't want to disappoint my coach, that's great.
I think a lot of that falls back to like being a product of your product. And it's something I feel like you do very well. Like you're very good at sharing with your clients, the challenges that you face, how you're overcoming them, the habits that you engage in on a daily basis to be at your best, the training, the nutrition, the cardio, the journaling, the reflection. And being the example, like I always tell my clients, like I'm still in a work in progress too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just further along the spectrum than you are.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can share my insights, the mistakes that I've made, and that helps you avoid those pitfalls or expedites your progress, I think that's the best case scenario. But let me ask you this. Does that voice in your head play into your own habits?
Which voice are we talking about? I have a
So
lot of
that
them there.
that
You probably
voice in
don't
your
know this
head of
about you. About
that,
me.
that voice in your head of, oh, I can't do this because if my clients knew I did this.
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I have said that, I think my whole life I've had the perspective, and judge me or don't, I don't even care, but this is where seriously, this is where I can,
There's
like,
no
I'm
judgment.
not hiring someone who's not doing what I need to do, right?
Totally.
So I'm not hiring a coach who is 300 pounds overweight and can tell me, I mean, maybe they're great and maybe they can tell me exactly what to do. And I'm the kind of person who's going to do it anyway, but I'm still not going to hire that person. Like,
Yep.
I got to know you're walking the walk when you're talking the talk.
For sure.
And so for me, when I'm doing things, for example, the last 3-4 weeks, I've been moving. For 4 weeks, I've been moving. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. And things have gotten a little off the track, which is fine, but I have a coach too. And I tell my coach, this is what's going on. And my coach says, because I'm in a cut phase, because I'm going to do a bodybuilding competition at some point at the age of 53,
Yeah.
God help us, which I've never done before.
God help your husband. Okay. Like, let's be
What?
serious. God help your husband.
I know. I kind of felt that way yesterday for him.
Oh,
A little bit, felt bad.
poor guy.
But my whole life has been anorexia and bulimia.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's the root of who I am, which is why, like, having a coach and tracking everything is so worthwhile for me. It works well for me because I can't get into that space. So last year I put on 25 pounds of muscle and whatever extra. So this year I've dropped 37 or
Holy
so.
shit.
Yeah, I'm at the lowest weight I've been at, like, ever. And I'm eating more, which is fantastic.
So cool.
However, I kind of plateaued. And during this 3 weeks, I ate so much trail mix. And my trail mix is peanuts and M&Ms. That's it.
Oh, I love that trail
I
mix with the
know.
raisins.
If a raisin gets in, okay, fine. But I don't even care. And so my coach, honest to goodness, was like, it doesn't matter. I think you needed a week break. We're going to de-stress. You're fine. It's not a big deal. I lost 2 pounds.
Yeah. That was one thing that I noticed. Like I know these things inherently because I've been coaching for so long, but it was one thing that I noticed when we had Austin with us at Olivia's show, bringing her stress level down
Mm,
just to know that everything was taken care of and that he was right there explaining the process. You could see just the fatigue rolling off of her and everything running smoothly. And so I think as coaches, we have so much power to help our clients. Um, you, I love that you mentioned, like, I'm not hiring an overweight coach. And here is where I will play devil's advocate and say there are plenty of coaches who are incredibly skilled coaches, but have their own battles.
yes.
I personally don't believe, like, I'm never going to hire a broke accountant. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hire, I'm not going to hire a skinny chef, right? Um, but I don't believe that all coaches need to be the pinnacle of whatever we're doing.
Oh, no.
But you do need to actively be seeking your own personal best, and that's where I stand on that. There are plenty of, we'll use strength coaches as an example. I don't need you to be an all-time world record holder. I mean, I'm currently not an all-time world record holder, but I'm actively pursuing to be at my best and continue to improve upon myself. And I think that's what our clients need to see.
Absolutely. And I think that, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I don't think you're playing devil's advocate. I was trying to, right. No. And I do that. This is kind of how I say things is 300 pounds overweight is excruciating. I mean, that's just a lot. I mean, that's extreme. Right. And you're right. That's the case is we all have our demons that we're fighting. We're all in the process of becoming better. And that is so important to remember because here's the thing, if we are going through our lives and we at some point, and I used to say this to my teachers because I became an public school administrator too, is the day you say to yourself, I have arrived, I am fully curated, I am done, this is
Oh,
me, that's the day you need to hit the door running because we don't need you anymore. And I
yep,
feel like that's life, that's everyone in every aspect of life. So yes, you could be a 300-pound coach and be great and be working toward whatever your goals are. Because that, as for me as a client and for me as a person on the planet, I want to be around people no matter what in every aspect that are always looking for ways to improve themselves or move themselves along the process of life or continue to learn as they go. There always has to be kind of that forward motion.
and I think that really inspires those that we work with, right? To see us doing the thing.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about limiting beliefs and something that you mentioned a little bit earlier on. You kind of alluded to it, the limiting beliefs that our clients face. And let's be honest, in most cases, our clients are their own worst enemies. What are some of the limiting beliefs that you see most often in your clients?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Um, I think that the biggest, like, if we were to like umbrella limiting belief is I know what to do. I just can't do it. I just can't. I just don't. I just don't do
Yeah,
it. I can't do it. I know what to do. I can't. And that umbrella kind of encompasses everything because then we say, okay, so let's increase protein. Let's start simple. Let's increase protein. It sounds simple. It's not easy, right?
for sure.
So then we have to figure out ways for them to, which I think is great about coaching, is I get to work with one on one and I get to go, how do we make this happen for you that works best for you in your life? And then we'll modify and adjust. Um, and then I hear, oh my gosh, it's just too hard. And oh, I can't do it. And oh, I've never done this before. I've never tried this before. And I've always been this way. So it's one of the limiting beliefs I think people have really is that honestly, a limiting belief is that change is too hard. Change is not too hard. It is not. You
Yeah.
have to decide and you have to know your why and you have to peel back the layers to figure out why you want to do it. If you don't have a good reason to do it, it's not going to happen anyway, no matter how hard you work at it. You have to know why you're doing it and you have to do small changes over time, not gigantic changes with everything.
Stole the words right out of my mouth. I think most cases, when you're talking about like fear of change, it's this perception that change either happens all at once or it happens in massive chunks. I think what we always need to do as coaches is to highlight these little wins along the way. I have a client right now, great friend of mine, hired me. He's like, bro, I need your help. It's like, cool. One caveat. I don't want the results that I used to. I just want to be happy. I was
Mm,
like, okay, context here. He's like, he was at one point like 6'2", 255 pounds, shredded.
wow.
He's 330 pounds now, definitely not shredded.
Mhm.
Okay. And I was like, okay, cool, man. Like, we can do that. And so he sent me a check in. This was a couple weeks ago. And he's like, man, the weight didn't come down this week. I feel like I'm doing, things mostly well. Um, but I did have pizza this weekend. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, walk me through it. How did this pizza go? And he's like, oh, like everyone was having pizza and I didn't plan on eating, but then I had 2 slices and then it was enough. Wait a second. So you had 2 slices of pizza and decided you were done? How do you not see this as a massive win?
Yeah.
And he was like, huh, I guess I've never actually done that before. And I was like, yeah, you were 330 pounds. Of course, you've never fucking done that before. But you just did. And it wasn't even a conversation in your head. You enjoyed what you had. You said you had enough and you moved on. I said, I don't give a fuck that you didn't lose weight this week. If you keep doing that,
Yes.
we'll be just fine.
Yes.
And it kind of clicked for him. And then he realized like the last 3 weeks, he's dropped 3 pounds every week. We've changed nothing.
Sure.
But all I've removed is this limiting belief that change has to happen all at once and it has to be in big chunks. And then that stress comes down.
Yep.
He's able to just do the things that he needs to do. And I think those little wins need to be highlighted so much. And I think you do a great job of it, especially in the conversations that we've had and the content that you put out, showing people that these little wins add up over time, that compounding interest of little
Yeah.
changes.
And it's interesting that you bring up that specific example, because what you did for him is you gave him the the outside vision of what he did, but it, like you said, it took the stress off of, like, you gave him permission to be a normal human being.
Yep.
Right? And in his head, he was probably beating it, like he was obviously beating himself up over it and taking energy away from himself to do that, to be negative, to go, see, I'm not worth it. See, this is ridiculous. See, I'm a terrible person. Like, what I've noticed, particularly with people that I talk to, my clients, is that we will take any little thing and use it as a bat to beat ourselves up instead of
Ooh,
turning around and saying, look at what I did. And as a coach, like you did, I do that all the time. I sit back and go, that's a win. That's a huge win.
yeah.
And to be able to say that to someone and spin their mindset, it's like a huge mind fuck for them, right? Is, let's turn that on its ass, like we just did, and you get to use that in a positive way. And now we can talk about, see how, yes, we manipulate nutrition, manipulate movement, we look at sleep, but we can take that mental energy stress right off of you, and bang, you're going to drop a pound or two, because physically you're more healthy, because mentally you stopped taking the bat to yourself.
I love that analogy. I love that analogy of taking anything we can and using it as a bat. I think in a lot of cases, when people deal with, okay, let's take this for example. You're a functional health coach. You're going to encounter some very challenging cases.
Mhm.
Okay. And I'm sure you have already. I think a lot of people over time, when they're dealing with an issue that has chronicity, something like obesity or something like, challenges with weight loss, their identity shifts to someone who can't lose weight or someone who is fat. And I think a big piece for coaches is, how do you help someone shift their identity?
God, it's so huge.
Yeah. Like, what is it that we can do in our practice to shine a light on, hey, you are not your problems. You are not your health. You are not your, uh, I get this a lot. It's like someone was on the podcast recently. His name's Kier. Very insightful. Tons of insight hidden behind some really dark comedy. He asked me the question. He's like, how many of the people that you work with could tell you who they are, without using their sport, their family, or their job in the
Mhm.
description.
Right.
And I think using training and nutrition as a vehicle to help someone discover those things,
Mhm.
how do we do that? How are some ways that we can actionably go about shining that light?
Man, oh, you know what? That's all I do.
Yep.
I mean, seriously, that's all I do. So, and one example I think that really kind of partners with what you just talked about is where I previously lived. It was a smaller town. I would go to the high school weight room and I would open the weight room, and I had students who came in. Most it was at first it was mostly girls because they didn't feel comfortable going into a weight room because it's always been the boys' area. And because of this area that we lived in, it was generally a male dominated thing. And I walked in that gym and was like, and I told the girls, like, come on in. I'll help you. I'll train you. I'll teach you how to do all this. We'll have good conversations about what it is. And I'm going to make you strong, but I'm going to make you strong on the inside so that when you walk out of here, even though you're physically stronger, you're going to stand up taller and you're not going to take anybody's shit because that happened a lot there. And they would come in and I didn't charge them. No way. I'm in there, I'm helping them. I'm building them up in their confidence. So what I always did was, and boys started coming in too. So it wasn't, I didn't tell the boys they couldn't, but um it was always focused on look at what you just did. That's an action that you did. How did that feel? How did that make you feel? How are you going to use that outside of here? How can you take that to build your confidence and build who you are? Because I don't care how big you are. I don't care how much you bench. I don't care whatever. But did you see how you overcame your thoughts on that? Did you see how you overcame your belief that you couldn't bench press 100 pounds? Look at, you just hit triple digits. How does that feel? You need to own that because that's who you are on the inside. As you pushed through, let's talk about where you've come from and where you are now. Look at the work that you did. Look at the belief that you've changed in yourself. So as a coach, helping people to see themselves differently by pointing out those things and then bringing it back so they reconnect with themselves. And like you said, your question was how many people define themselves outside of their role related to others on the planet and what they do. And that's part of what we do as coaches is say, we're going to have you reconnect with who you really are. And who you really are is your soul and your emotions. And those are all connected to who you say you are in your head. So those
Yeah.
conversations that you're having in your head that you're not paying attention to, they better be good.
That's one of the reasons I've always kind of gravitated towards performance sport. And I think it's something that CrossFit has done a fantastic job, especially for females, of shifting away from aesthetics as a measuring stick and towards performance. So you have all of these women who previously measured their worth based on the way they look. Now they're seeing their ability to perform and to progress and to like just elevate themselves in different ways and unlock these things within themselves they never thought possible. And we see that all the time with our clients. Like my client who had two pieces of pizza and said no, that's a part of his identity now as someone who understands moderation and can control his appetite.
Yes.
I have, clients who it's funny. I actually had this conversation with Liv. I asked her the same question because I was curious. I knew she would have a good answer. And she's like, I'm someone who just does hard things.
Hmm.
And each time she does something harder, like most recently when she won her pro card,
Hmm.
she's like, nothing will ever be as hard as what I just did. And I was like, how fucking powerful is that? Like, if we can give our clients that type of feeling of nothing is going to be as hard as what you just did, go forth and dominate your life.
Yes.
Like how
Yes.
many clients have you had where, you do something, you achieve something with regards to nutrition or training, and then they go get a promotion.
Right? Something else in their life changes for the positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I say that a lot. I have two tattoos that I'm super proud of on my forearms. One is Ganesha and one is the Om symbol. And so Om symbol, right, is the universal sign of that your soul, your internal breath, that kind of a thing. Um, And Ganesha is the goddess of overcoming obstacles, and that has been my guiding light since I was 20 years old. You have to overcome those obstacles. You always will. You will always overcome the obstacle that you see in front of you that you choose to overcome. You just have to. And every time you overcome an obstacle, just like Liv, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. And guess what? There's going to be another one, and you're going to do it because you've always succeeded before. Like, you have to do that. Choose to do something hard. Because you know what? There's so many people, I talk about this all the time, is you can either do what's easy or you can do what's right. They're rarely the same thing, and
Yep.
it's always gonna be hard. So get used to doing the hard stuff, and then that builds you up and makes you a giant in your own life.
Did you get the tattoos when you were 20?
I did not.
I was going to say, because the tattoos that I got when I was 20, I fucking hate, and they're so bad.
Oh no, I got a little one when I was 20. And it's funny because it's this Chinese symbol and it was supposed to be the symbol for courage. And
No.
my nieces are half Chinese, and they looked at it and they went, "Oh, Laura, that is not what that means. I'm
Oh
sorry."
no.
Yeah. So be careful. Little warning to everyone. Yeah. They're like, "That's not what that means." And they go, "Well, it kind of means that because it actually means big liver." I know. I
Oh,
know.
not like big liver, like your organ, like someone who lives big.
Right. No, like your
Okay.
organ. No, it's like your organ. I like, okay. So anyway, be careful what you get as a tattoo. But yeah. So
If someone takes away anything from this conversation, it's watch what tattoos you get when
yeah,
you're young.
they are permanent. Be careful. So
Yeah, the first tattoo I got was actually a barbell across my shoulders, and the guy was like, "Well, how many plates do you want on it?" I was like, "I don't know, like 5.5. That seems pretty crazy." And here I am, I've squatted 8.5 plates.
right.
I'm like, "Yeah, they're 100-pound plates now."
Right. There you go. It's perfect. Just get a little addition on there. That's great.
That's funny. All right, let's shift our conversation a little bit towards the functional side of things, because this is an area where, for anyone who isn't familiar with what functional health is, can you give a little bit of a background on what the difference between maybe a typical coach would be and someone who has a functional background?
Yeah. Um, Functional, if you're looking for a functional coach, you're wanting someone who gets to the root cause. That's what a functional coach does. It's root cause coaching. We're going to find the root cause of whatever is going on with you health wise, and we're going to work on that root cause. That doesn't mean we're not going to do the foundational work first. So, your foundational basics, nutrition, sleep, stress, movement, exercise, those kinds of things are super important. You have to have the foundational aspects. However, a functional coach is always going to go further with that. A functional coach is going to say, yeah, these things are happening. Let's get some blood work. Let's look at your symptoms. Let's look at your biofeedback. Do we need blood work? Do we need a GI map? Do we need a Dutch test? So they're going to dig deeper. A functional health, like myself, we will dig deeper. We'll get those tests done so we can really see physiologically what's happening inside of you to make you look a certain way, because here's my belief is, and not just my belief, how you feel on the inside, how you're doing physiologically really projects itself physically. So I can
Sure.
see how you feel most times. And then we have to look at what your symptoms are and what your biofeedback is. Are you fatigued? Are you able to sleep well? Those kinds of things. How is your digestion? And so we do the testing as a functional coach, and we're able to look at what's really happening physiologically and address those things as well as those foundational things at the same time to really bring everything together for you, not band-aid anything. There's no band-aids involved, right?
Yeah, I love the way you describe that. And one thing that always comes to mind whenever I hear someone talk about functional health coaching is the barrier that presents itself, where most people have felt so badly for so long that they don't actually understand what feeling good feels like.
Mm-hmm.
When you're initially working with a client, how often is it that you're having someone say, "I feel like shit, fix me," versus you start working with somebody and then it uncovers itself that there are all these other problems?
I will tell you 98% of the time, people come to me and they say, I just want to lose weight and I can't. I don't know why.
Okay.
I can't lose weight. I don't know why. Nothing's working. And I hear this, I'm doing everything. I am working so hard. I just added a marathon to my calendar. I just added this and this, and but what they're doing is they're taking everything they're seeing from the social media influencers and everything that the television is telling them to do more and eat less and all those things, and it's not working. And that's when they start to go, and I dig further, ask a question. Well, how do you feel daily? Well, it's hard to get up in the morning. My sleep, I don't sleep great. So you kind of dig in and see those symptoms, the things they're not paying attention to, because all they're paying attention to is, I have to eat less and do more. And it's my fault. And I'm highly disappointed in myself. And they have feelings of embarrassment, and they feel disgusted with themselves, and they feel disappointed, and they can't do enough, and they've tried everything, and they're pretty much at the end of their rope. It's like, all right, let's back up and let's figure this out. Most people don't come to me saying, I feel like garbage all the time. Something's got to be wrong. Because most people, when they feel like garbage, they go to the doctor,
Yeah, that's true. They
right?
probably get very, very little help.
Yeah, and they get a Band-Aid. They get a Band-Aid, or they get an SSRI. Like, oh, you can't sleep, here's an SSRI. Have a great time, right? So what happens though is, once we start to have those conversations within the first couple of weeks, they then realize, oh, I have felt bad for a long time. I didn't realize that I'm feeling. And I say that too. I'll be like, honey, you don't know how bad you feel yet. We're going to start to make you feel good. And then you're going to go, wow, did I feel really bad?
Yeah. The other thing that I often encounter whenever I'm hearing people speak about functional health coaching is, of course, we're going to start with the basics, right? We're going to start with stress management, nutrition, movement, sleep. I've always been of the mind that 90% of the problems are fixed right there,
Mm-hmm.
especially when someone starts to realize, like, oh, I haven't had a solid bowel movement in 8 years, and all of a sudden I'm having normal poops, or I
Or
haven't
they
slept
haven't
through the
pooped in
night.
8 years.
Yeah, yeah. The or the oh, I'm just not a good sleeper.
Yes.
Like, well, that's probably a deeper issue. Um, can you give a little bit of maybe a synopsis on, like, how you go about triaging that client, like from an assessment standpoint, maybe?
So I always do an intake form. I always have a conversation. So I get the data, and I have the conversation. So I get to hear what their thoughts are on their biofeedback. I get to dig in and ask questions, but I also have an intake form that's about 6 pages long. Check the boxes. What are you experiencing? Because a lot of people are experiencing symptoms that they don't pay attention to until they're asked directly about it, right? And so I take those things and we have conversations, and really, I have them do a 3-day food log so I can see where their nutrition is. So I take all of these things, I take all the data, and I look at their lifestyle, what they do for a living, what their family life is like, so I can think about allostatic load in that way, or stress load on their body. Um, and then you know what? Depending on age, depending on if they have chronically dieted, those kinds of things, and what their concerns are. So I'm not just looking at everything that I've collected in terms of data, like hard data or the questions I've asked. I also take into consideration what their concerns are, right? So in fact, I had a client come to me, and she thought she was in menopause. I'm totally in perimenopause. I might even be just entering into menopause because I can't lose weight and all these things are happening, and et cetera, et cetera. So she didn't want to get lab work at first. So we just worked on the foundational things of nutrition, because that can help. Like you said, functional coaching is great. We still do the foundational things, because a lot of the things, not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, many things we can actually address by getting the foundational things in order.
For sure.
And then we can see what's left over. Um, we got her blood work done finally. And I knew she wasn't in perimenopause. I was like, I'm pretty sure you're not. I mean, I figured her hormones were probably a little imbalanced, just because she was super stressed out, because she talked about how her life was. She even talked so fast. I was like, oh, Lord, girl, slow down. Right. And, you're obviously
That-
stressed out. But she had no clue. She's like, I'm not stressed out. Her labs came back, And I got her on a Zoom call. We pulled up her labs and I said, here's the good news or the bad news. Depends on how you want to take it. Your hormones are fine. For me as a functional health coach, that's great news, right? For her, now we have to really dig in and deal with what we need to deal with, which was her stress levels.
Well,
So,
for her, there's no more monster under the bed anymore.
right, there's nothing to blame but yourself. And that is a hard place to be. That's a
Yeah,
hard place to be. So, when I triage someone in terms of what their needs are, I look at the whole picture. And one of the biggest things that I look at, because I am not a template coach, I'm going to modify things to fit what you need when we're working one on one. Now, I have a group coaching aspect to my a service that is not as in depth as this. But
for
when I'm
sure.
working with someone one on one full coaching, the biggest thing that I do to triage them is I look at who they are as a person and what they're capable of in this moment, in this baseline moment. Because if you have gut health issues and I can see that you do, you send me your pictures, we've had the conversation, all the symptoms are there, and there is no possible way that you could handle eating what you need to eat to be on a or taking the supplements you need to take to be in a gut protocol. I'm not putting you in a gut protocol.
Right.
So the first thing I do is triage where you are right now, emotionally and mentally, to see what we can handle. That's the biggest thing. And then I
I
move
think that,
everything around that.
yeah, I think that's a phenomenal summary because I always believe that the coaching process should be goal driven, right? We should know kind of where we're headed or what the goal outcomes are, especially for the client. But if we're not making data driven decisions along with those, you're really shooting in the dark. I mean, with this client, it was probably pretty obvious that you needed to start with the foundation. And yeah, a lot of the stuff will be cleared up with those foundational elements. But until you got that blood work, you were kind of just hoping for the best. I I often will get clients because I deal mostly with larger men at this point. Most of my clients are larger men. I'll get them like, oh yeah, I haven't had blood work in like 3, 4 years. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, I could feel fine. I'm like, okay, like you might feel fine, but let's take a look under the hood.
Hmm.
Right? You haven't had blood work in a long time. Let's just, for shits and gigs, let's go look at it. And, in my head, I'm like, okay, I know what this person's been eating. I know what this person's lifestyle is. His HDL is going to be in the shitter. His LDL is going to be really high. He's going to have, you know, elevated resting blood glucose. He's going to have all these inflammatory markers. And lo and behold, you know, we get it back and, ooh, Coach Paul's right. And they're like, well, what does this mean? I'm like, realistically, it doesn't mean very much, but it gives us a snapshot as to what's going on. And now we can be a little bit more targeted in those things that we focus on. So, yeah, we're going to track your macros and yeah, we're going to improve your food choices. But because your HDL is low, let's keep your fats a little bit higher. Let's make sure you're getting those fats from polyunsaturated sources. And they're like, oh, like this is a lot more complicated than I thought.
Do you find that you get more buy-in then when you have someone when you actually do the labs? Does that help their buy-in to have that hard data in front of them?
Yes, but only because it creates an impetus for change.
Okay.
Ultimately, my client population is coming to me for performance reasons. When they realize their performance is being hampered by things outside of performance,
Hmm.
that's where I get the true buy in. I also think when you, and this is an advantage as a functional health coach versus someone who might not have these skills. Like I would not consider myself a functional health coach by any means, but when you, it's funny because when you run the labs, when you run the tests, you're getting to know the inside of the person physiologically, but their perception of what you're doing is getting to know them on the inside as people. They get to know the fact that you actually care.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So having those data driven decisions working along, my question for you is how deep do you dig? Right? At what point are you satisfied? Because I feel like your satisfaction with the results being okay, now we don't need protocols, we don't need fancy supplements. I kind of know what the answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. How do you keep them pushing forward when quote unquote my problems are fixed?
Well, It's more about then lifestyle. It's more about their goals. Like we kind of reconnect about goals quite often. This is
Right.
where we are in the process. This is what you said your goal was. Okay. Yep. Okay. So we reached that goal. So how do you feel about that? Yeah, I feel great. But, and there's always a but
Always a
now
but.
they
Yeah.
have another goal. It's like, okay, so let's talk about how you feel about that. Let's talk about what you're willing to do to get there. Do you really want to, like, for me, and it happened to me, I got my hormones in the right spot. I did all the things I needed to do as a person, right? With the coaches I have had. And then, and I've run marathons, I've done the biking thing. I've always had a goal. And then my coach is a bodybuilding coach. And I've never wanted to do that. But I got to a spot where I was like, I don't have a goal anymore. And I don't have anything new to try for. And then I was like, well, I was 50 last year when I decided to start when we did the building phase. I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's have fun. I want to see what I can push my body to do that I've
Oof.
never done before. That I've never done before. Because I know mentally I have the capability to do it. Right?
Right.
I know I do. I also know that I have an interesting piece of my life with my experience that I have to be careful when it comes to body image and because of the anorexia and bulimia, right? I have to be very careful with what I'm doing. So I have to trust my coach and I have to talk to my coach a lot more. But I was like, let's give it a shot. And honestly, Paul, I don't care if I get on a stage. I don't care if I get on a stage. What I want to do is I want to see what I can do and what my body can do. And what I find with my clients is when we get to that point where they've hit their initial goals, we reconnect about it. We look at them, we celebrate them, we talk about them because we've been celebrating their targets toward that goal the entire time anyway. And there's always something new that comes up. Well, now I want to do this. Like, all right. And it might not be something like getting on stage for a bodybuilding show. It might be, well, now that I've lost these 10 pounds, now I want to like be able to see my muscles more. So let's transition that. Great. Or whatever it is.
I think that's great. And I mean, fuck, a bodybuilding show was because my path was similar. It's like I need something. I can't power lift, which was previously the vehicle that I used to do. So I'm like, I'll just do a bodybuilding show. I knew I could do it,
Right.
but it was without question the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And when people hear me say that, they almost can't believe it because, like, I mean, squatting 800 pounds was way easier than a bodybuilding show. Like
I believe
way
that.
easier.
I believe that. Yeah.
Um, all right. I think it's time to transition to some quick hit questions
Okay.
because I've loved all of your answers thus far, and I feel like it's going to be very entertaining for you to hear and answer my stupidity. First question for you: what is the most ridiculous result of lab work you've ever seen? Like what you've gotten lab work back
Oh,
and you've just scratched your head.
wow. God, that's hard. The most ridiculous lab work I've ever seen. That is a hard one to answer. I don't get a ton of crazy lab work. I'll tell you, you know what? I'll tell you what it is. Um, and the reason it's crazy is only because of how Western medicine dealt with it.
Okay.
72-year-old woman is my mom, got her lab work and her electrolytes were crazy off, like really off. Her electrolytes were off, her glucose was high, all these things were happening and she was dizzy and they put her in the ER. They put her
What?
in the ER. And I went, "No, she is having like her stress levels are crazy. Like she's having an adrenaline dump. Her adrenals are dumping. She's fine. She doesn't need to be here. You guys need to." She was on a LASIK, right? A water pill because she's on blood
Oh,
pressure medication. Right.
yeah.
Like you all, and they didn't even know she was on it still. All their computers weren't talking to each other. And I was like, I know what's happening to her. Just stop. Stopped. And none of them was reading. They weren't reading those results. They weren't looking at those at all. They didn't take the entirety of the lab work and look at it to say, oh, her adrenals are suffering right now. We just need to do X, Y, and Z. Nope. I was the one who came up with it. I was the one who figured it out. And that was super fun and frustrating at the same time.
Yeah, you probably saved your mom's life though.
I
Or
feel like
close
I
to it.
did because now she's on magnesium because her magnesium was low and they wouldn't test that until I told them to. And they took her off the LASIK because I'm like, she can't be on that because you're screwing with her electrolytes. What are you doing? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, let's put her on the strongest water pill you can possibly be on.
Yeah. And then not document that she's on it. They actually had it in her chart, but they had it that she wasn't taking it anymore.
Nice.
Yeah, it was fun.
What is your most proud moment as a coach? And then what has been your most proud moment as an athlete?
Most proud moment as a coach. Ooh, there's so many. My gosh, I have so many proud moments as a coach, and it's always around when the light bulb goes off for a client. Um, and even the small ones are just ridiculously, I'm getting choked up thinking about it.
Fills your cup, eh?
Yeah, every day it fills my cup. So one of the proudest moments, I guess I would say, is I have a client who I was working with who went away for a while. I think she's going to come back though. We'll see. A type 1 diabetic who had been a diabetic since she was, I think, 22 or 23, and she's mid 40s now,
Mm-hmm.
and started working with me. And I was the first person who helped her to get her glucose levels and her insulin levels where they were supposed to be.
That's pretty special.
And her life changed, like her
Yeah.
life complete. It took so much stress off of her, and she was so much more happy and so less stressed about that. And she is doing such a great job of managing it that she has extended her life. And I'm so
Yeah.
excited that I was so proud to be able to be a part of that process for her.
That's so cool. What about your most proud moment as an athlete?
I've been an athlete in so many ways. Because I used to only do cardio, and then I did CrossFit for a long time, and now I'm like strictly strength training. I think my proudest moment as an athlete really is getting strong at my age and really focusing on the strength. So I would say, like, in terms of that, probably being able to bench press in the triple digits for the first time
Fuck
in my
yeah.
life. Right? Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And my first pull up was amazing.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, that pull-up
That's
was
huge.
hard, man. That pull-up was hard. And in that vein, my client, before I moved 4 weeks ago, we had been working to get her a pull-up. That was one of her main goals, and she finally got it. And I was so proud of her. I guess that was probably the most recent proudest moment as a coach, because I knew she could have gotten that thing 3 months before she did, but it was in her head. She was
Right.
all in her head. So we had to work through that first. And I was like, just get up there and do it. And she did it. And it was fantastic. So yeah, those pull-ups are super important.
I love it. Top 5 coaches in the industry who you look up to in terms of either their practice or their content or their education.
Austin Stout, number 1.
Can't say me.
I can't say you.
Can't say me.
You were right there. Okay, I can't say you. So Austin Stout for sure. He is my mentor. He is a friend, and he is ridiculous. He's high. I can't even speak enough about him. Then there is Sam Miller,
Okay.
and he's all around a great guy. And he's where I first started getting education. So he's amazing. Kenneth with Foundry Training. He is ridiculously good at what he does. He is my coach right now. He's also a good friend. And let's see,
2 more.
2 more. I have seriously, I aspire to be much more like Mare. Meredith.
That's a pretty great
Honestly,
compliment.
she's got everything going on. I am similar in age to her, I believe. I'm not quite sure. But she's got the business, the way she works with people, her understanding of women in particular in terms of health and wellness. I just think she's kind of the total package when it comes to that. I really aspire to be more like her, especially her really long hair. That's a thing. Just flips that stuff all over. Fifth coach. It's always the last one's always the hardest. Honestly, I follow Jake Dolashall. I think that's how you say his name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow him a lot. That man has a ton of information. Now, I don't know him personally and I don't work with him, but the information and the way he puts out his information is very user-friendly, very understandable. And he also caveats it with, you probably shouldn't do this stuff on your own, people, but here's something you can try. And he does everything kind of at that base level, like give it a shot, but don't be crazy. You know, he doesn't get too, but he also knows pretty much everything. So
Love it.
yeah.
Last question for you. if there was one person that you would like to see me interview on the podcast, who would it be? But the caveat is you have to help me get them on the podcast.
Oh, you know who you're asking, right? We just talked about this the other day. Where I was living was like a prison. I don't see people a lot. Who can I help you get on? See, that's the hard part because I know who I'd want you to interview, but I can't help you get there, right? Like you got Joe Rogan would be fantastic.
Yeah, but come on.
I'm serious. Or Jocko, that'd be just ridiculous.
I did meet Jocko in an airport once.
Did you? There's your in.
We're in the Charlotte airport, and I was standing beside him, and I was looking at my phone, so I was trying to figure out why my flight was delayed. And I look up, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And he was like, he like turned his head to me, and I was like, "Are you Jocko Willink?" He's like, "Yeah."
So that really is his voice, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Dude, huge fan. Love your books. Hope you're doing well." He's like, "Hey man, what do you do?" And he like actually had a conversation with me.
Fantastic.
Which I thought was super cool.
Yeah.
So very cool, dude. 10 out of 10.
There you go. See, and Andy Frisella, that would be a good one too. However, if you haven't had Sam Miller on,
I would, yeah, Sam's definitely on the list.
Sam would be a good one. Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask Sam. Laura, it has been my absolute pleasure. I'll make sure everyone has links to where they can find you in the show notes, but do you have any parting words of wisdom for the audience before we hop off?
You know, I do. Thank you for asking. And by the way, before we hop off, thank you for having me. This has been incredible. So fun. I loved chatting with you. It doesn't even feel like a podcast. I mean, if I actually didn't look like I was in a prison right now, I feel like I was sitting in a living room talking to you. Parting words of wisdom. It's something that I said to my client this morning. I think that the biggest stumbling block or obstacle that we all encounter is when something happens, we want things to happen so fast that we push so hard against the universe, and all it does is push right back against us. So when you feel like you're pushing hard against the universe and you're really running up against that wall, all I would say is take a step back, sit down, 5 deep belly breaths. Things are going to work out.
That's probably one of the best ways that we've finished off the podcast. I love that.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Laura, thank you so much for joining me. It's been my pleasure to share the podcast with you today. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one.